Okay. So let's get started, Jen. Thanks for your time and you being over here for the first time, I think, for the Indian audience. Thanks a lot. So, hello, viewers, and welcome to a brand new episode of DLive.in podcast. Most of us may not completely understand or even agree to the fact how harmful food addiction can be, right? And in today's podcast, we'll precisely get to know various aspects, including the types of food addictions, its impact on population, some remedies, and quick tips to keep the food addiction at bay. The session is planned for 45 minutes, followed by some Q&A. So, well, this is Yogesh Dikshit, your host for today. I'm a low carb enthusiast and a DLive.in member and a volunteer. The purpose of this podcast is to share a wealth of knowledge with our viewers. And for any nutritional or medical guidance that you may have, please reach out to your doctor or a low carb nutritionist, right? So, a quick view about DLive.in. DLive.in is an online community, a trendsetter in India in the low carb nutrition space, and helping individuals on many metabolic disorders, including specifically diabetes. DLive.in was founded by Mr. Anup Singh. He is an engineer from IIT, a top-ranked engineering institute in India. DLive.in is a NAC accredited autonomous institute and offers certificate and diploma courses specializing on low carb nutrition. The courses are designed for people who would want to gain deeper knowledge in this particular field and help those suffering from metabolic disorders. DLife.in has 250 plus success stories up until now and 1200 odd Indian regional low carb recipes available on its channels. And recently, DLive.in and Anup Singh were felicitated with the Icons of India Award for pioneering low carb nutrition in India. This was awarded by the prestigious Outlook magazine. So now, without any further ado, I welcome our guest, Dr. Jen Unwin, in today's podcast. Just to give a brief about Jen, Jen is a consultant clinical psychologist in England and recipient of British Psychological Society's Karen Ehlert Lifetime Achievement Award in Clinical Health Psychology. Jen has been helping people overcome their chronic health diseases by providing them hope, which is a key aspect of her therapy. Dr. Jen and her husband, Dr. David Unwin, have designed a low carb program for diabetes.co.uk, which up until now, close to 500,000 people have underwent and benefited from. Her book titled Fork in the Road is recently published and is guiding many who are suffering from food addictions. And oh, by the way, you can reach out to Jen on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is Jen_Unwin. So I'll take a pause now, Jen, before we get started. Can you please share a bit more about yourself and the area of work that you have been doing for the past several years?
Yes, of course. I'm so delighted to be with you and to be able to talk to you about this. Is my favourite topic, the topic of food addiction. And one of the reasons why it's my favourite topic is in recent years I've come to understand that that was my own issue. And of course, those things that are close to our own hearts are the things that we get most passionate about. So looking back. As a child, I was very, very interested in food, particularly sweet things and carbohydratey things.
Yeah.
And I would, if I had any pocket money, I would always go and spend it at the sweet shop. And
I know. Yeah.
maybe some of those people listening will have that same experience. So I was always very focused on food. And so the result, of course, was that I was a rather overweight teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a lot of fun, really. So that set up a lifetime of dieting and putting weight back on. And again, I'm sure that's something everybody who's listening can understand, or they've maybe had friends and family who do this, where they lose weight really successfully, because they're determined, and then the weight creeps back on.
Absolutely.
And that went on. And then about 10 years ago, it would be that I discovered low carb. And keto. And I read a book called Escape the Diet Trap by Dr. John Briffer, who's a British GP, and it's a lovely little book which explained the science of low carb and why it worked. And I'd be reading that out to David, as you've said, he's a GP,
Yeah.
And he was amazed by this. So I thought, right, I'm going to have a go.
Mm-hmm.
So I went cold turkey, as they say, which is that I
Yeah.
went full into it and felt terrible for about 8 days. Absolutely terrible, because I've never done anything like that before.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was possible to live without carbohydrate.
Yeah.
And then I felt amazing. I did really well with that, but still from time to time would, have slip ups or fall off the wagon, as we say. And I think it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, I started to think, I heard somewhere about this idea of food addiction, or that sugar could be addictive. And I thought,
True.
oh, do you know, that really rings true with me, the way that I behave. If I have a little bit, I
Yeah.
can't stop. Like, just like a person with alcohol may struggle, or
Right.
drugs or nicotine. Or I thought, well, that's that started to sort of fit for me. And I thought, well, it's amazing, because I'm a psychologist,
Yeah. Yeah.
as you've said.
True.
And why hadn't I thought of my behavior in that way before?
Yeah.
So I started looking into it, finding out more. And I actually retired from the NHS about just over 2 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons for taking retirement was to learn everything I could about food addiction. So I trained with a woman called Bitten Johnson, who's in Sweden,
Okay.
who's probably the international best person clinically
Mm-hmm.
for food addiction, and she's now trying to train other people. So I did her training,
Mm-hmm.
and I met lots of other amazing people on that training.
Right.
And since then, I've been really specializing in this area. And during lockdown here in the UK, as you say, I wrote the book Fork in the Road,
Yeah.
which has really put everything that I've learned about food addiction into that book. So
Right.
that's my kind of personal journey in terms of food addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as you say, obviously I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've always specialized in trying to help people with chronic illness
Yep.
live their best lives and get the best quality of life by changing how they manage and they cope with the symptoms that they've got, sort of both sort of psychologically but also practically. And that's how I started working with David in his practice, to help people there with type 2 diabetes to change their behavior around food, so that they could keep going with low carb. And as you've heard, and we were saying before, just as we were chatting, that now the practice has got 100 people drug-free remission from diabetes. And
that's amazing. Yeah,
it's really so exciting. We're still going strong. We're learning all the time how to help people, and part of that is the support side. And we run groups since lockdown. We've been doing them online.
Mm-hmm.
But really, people need that long-term support, because the world we live in is very full of sugar. I mean, certainly in the UK, it's crazy. The ultra-processed food, the sugar, the carbohydrate. It's every celebration over here, every birthday, Christmas. We have Mother's Day. I don't know if you have Mother's Day. All of these things, Valentine's, all to do with sugar and cake.
Right.
So it's hard for people to stay on track. So that's where the psychology bit comes in, is how to sort of stay on track. And then obviously when we're talking about food addiction, psychology becomes a major part of it, a major part of helping people to stay abstinent from sugar and carbohydrate, and starting to use some of these concepts from addiction medicine, just in the same way as we would talk about if we were talking about alcohol or nicotine or drugs. So you wouldn't just have a little bit of alcohol at the weekend if you really had a problem with alcohol, because you can never just have a little bit. And that's really kind of what defines also a food addict. You can't have a little bit, or you can't stay stopped, as we say. So that's how it's all sort of come together, was the personal story, but also my interests in psychology and helping people to change behavior have sort of come together very nicely to keep me very busy in my retirement.
Absolutely, and that's wonderful to know. I mean, the journey that you mentioned, and that typically the behavior that you mentioned can most of us will probably, it will resonate very well with most of us in terms of addiction, in terms of going back to that particular sugary sweet test, right? So is there any definition for addiction that is available, or when we realize if someone is basically getting into that zone of being food addicted, is there any threshold that we can basically look at in terms of calling someone he or she is basically a food addicted person?
Yes, what a
Yeah.
great question. Yes. So when it comes to diagnosing an addiction,
Mhm.
generally what we'd turn to is either a thing called the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Mhm.
Version 5 is out now, and it's published by the American Psychiatric Association.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or we might turn to a thing which is called the ICD-10, which is the International Classification of Diseases, and is published
Mhm.
by the World Health Organization. Now, neither of those organizations recognize food as an addictive substance yet.
Okay. Okay.
There is some campaigning going on, obviously, to get that recognized. But what you can do is use the criteria that they use for substance use addiction.
Yeah.
So that would include substances like alcohol
Okay.
and drugs and nicotine
Drugs.
and so on.
Yeah.
And if you take those criteria, you can sort of come up with some of the areas. So there's the 6 main criteria. I'll just go through some of them now. So
Sure.
one is being unable to, so wanting to cut down
Mhm.
on on eating sugars and carbohydrates in this
Yeah.
case, but being unable to. So thinking, I need to stop eating this stuff, but really struggling to, or being
Yeah.
able to do it for a little while
Uh-huh.
and then being going back to it.
Right.
So
Right.
so not being able to cut down.
Yeah.
Another is where you're using, again in this case, sugar or carbohydrate to sort of help with any form of emotional discomfort. So
Yeah.
upset, loneliness,
Right.
boredom, anger. If you're using food when really it's an emotional problem, so
Yeah.
that would be another thing to look out for.
Right.
Being very preoccupied with planning how to get the food, or when you can next have it, and really always thinking about it a lot.
Mhm.
Really taking over your thinking and your
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
That's another
Right.
one. So that's
Right.
3. Another one is if anybody objected, or has anybody sort of commented or worried about, of loved ones said, I'm a bit worried about your eating,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
seems to be doing you harm, that people who are addicted will carry on even when they know it's doing them physical harm or
Right.
mental harm,
Yeah.
making them more depressed, or really somebody with type 2 diabetes who
Mhm.
carried on eating high levels of sugar.
Yeah.
That would be a sign that somebody was struggling.
Sure.
Another is having more of the substance than you intended. So you might say to yourself, oh, I'm just going to have a
Mhm.
little bit of that dessert, or I'm just going to have
Yeah.
one biscuit or one ice cream,
True.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
you end up eating the whole tub.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last one would probably be where other activities in your life that you really might want to be focusing on, like family, friends, work,
Yes.
exercise, are getting sort of neglected because
Yeah.
too much emotion or thought is going into the food, and you start neglecting other things. So
Right.
those
Right.
those would be some of the things to
Yeah.
look out for. And of course they do completely, I know you're nodding there, they do completely apply to food. I mean,
Yeah.
that was me. I wanted to stop. Often I'd be eating things and think, why am I'm not even hungry, why am I eating this?
I'm eating. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It happens with most of us. Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you either for weight reasons or health reasons or emotional reasons, you want to cut down,
Yeah.
and you say, right, tomorrow's the day, I'm going to start tomorrow, and tomorrow comes and it's really difficult, and you end
Yeah.
up with your
Right.
hand in
Agreed.
the
Yeah.
in the biscuit tin.
Yeah.
So those would all be things to look out for. And of course there's a spectrum. Everybody sometimes eats a little bit more
Yeah.
than they should, or but I think there is a characteristic person who has from early days. It usually does start early on in childhood, or at least teenage, where the struggle began and has carried on all their lives. And people can sometimes normal weight, they don't have to be overweight or underweight, and sometimes they've been diagnosed with an eating disorder or binge eating disorder or something like that. There's quite a big overlap with binge eating disorder, if people are familiar with that.
Yeah, and that's really a very broad spectrum in terms of what kind of different reasons which can influence our eating habits or behavior. So that's really great to get an understanding about that. But I think frequently we discussed about, or most of the times we discussed about, carbohydrates and sugar are the key constituents of this particular addiction. So is it true that we should be basically focusing on those as the outliers, or basically the key influencers when it comes to food addiction, the carbohydrates and sugar? And the follow-up to that is, what characteristics of that particular food group, let's say either a carbohydrate or a sugar, what exactly makes those addictive, right? I mean, so that, I mean, once we get to understand that, probably it will be easier for us to keep ourselves away from that, stay away from that. Yeah.
Again, absolutely excellent question. So the thing that food addicts should be really aware of are sugars, added sugars in any form. So it doesn't matter if people say, oh, honey is a healthy sugar. No, it's just sugar to your brain and to your body. Anything sugary, maple syrup, honey, brown sugar, white sugar, yes, definitely. The refined carbohydrates, so any grains, they will digest down into sugar. So rice, potato, pasta. Obviously, we have more of, you guys will have more rice, I guess, or the breads. Anything made from flour, and ultra processed foods, which usually are a combination of fat, sugar, carbohydrate, and often other chemicals sort of thrown in for good measure. So anything that's ultra processed, donuts, McDonald's, they all have fat, sugar, salt, and they're kind of designed to be highly palatable. Also, so those are the three main categories. So sometimes some food addicts struggle with some other foods, but that's a sort of individual thing, that once you've eliminated all of those things, you'll be able to see. So for example, one example that I give in the book as well is, for me, was peanut butter.
I know.
Often in the keto world, low carb world, people say, oh, peanut butter or nut butters are fine. Protein and fat, great. Well, I could not moderate peanut butter. I would be in and out of that jar with a teaspoon. And in the end, I thought, right, that's another thing. Just don't buy it. Don't have it in the house. So peanut butter is one example for me. So that would come under the category of sugars, flours, refined carbohydrates, or processed food, but it was still a no-go for me. And some people also struggle with dairy. Things like cheese can be quite crazy. But that's a sort of individual thing. And then we come to the question of, well, what is it about those foods actually that makes them addictive? See? People think, well, maybe food addiction is just what we call a process addiction, a bit like gambling. It's just a behavior that becomes addictive, because it's rewarding. But I would really counter that, and there's plenty of evidence in the research to show that sugar and these refined carbohydrates that break down into sugar very quickly in the body actually do act in the same areas of the brain as addictive as drugs and alcohol. It's in the sort of primitive reward center of the brain, and that what you get is a big boost of something called dopamine, which is a brain neurotransmitter, which is to do with motivation and reward. And that's why that we're very motivated to repeat any behaviors that give us this boost of dopamine. So anytime we've eaten let's say a certain kind of cake or biscuit, the next time we see that or we hear it, or we even think about it,
Mhm.
that sets the dopamine going.
Yes.
And this automatic sort of primitive process where we try and we then focused, we kind of locked in to pursue that thing, and it kind of it overpowers the logical thinking part of our brain as well.
Yeah.
So you can't, once that's in motion, once, I mean, you may have had this experience, once you think, oh, I could have, you know, those biscuits are in the cupboard, it becomes this kind of train going
True.
that you,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
hard to get off until you've eaten that thing, and then the regret comes. So
Yeah.
dopamine's a big part of it. And then
Right.
unfortunately what happens is the brain doesn't really like these big spikes of dopamine, so it dampens down the dopamine receptors in the
Oh,
brain.
okay. Okay. Interesting.
Which is a little bit unfortunate, because obviously we need our dopamine receptors.
Yes.
And it means that next time, you'll, just like alcohol, you'll have to have more to get the same effect.
Right. Right.
That's
Yeah.
this thing that we call tolerance. So
Yep.
so
Yep.
maybe one piece of cake is enough to
Right.
give you that nice feeling.
Yeah.
After a couple of weeks, maybe it's 2 pieces of cake, and then maybe it's the whole cake. And that's the
Yeah.
position that some people get to, where they end up eating great big volumes to
Yes.
get the feeling of sort of relief, if you like.
Yeah.
And that's because the brain's trying to protect itself. But of course, all of that sugar is very damaging. It also, sugar also stimulates other things like serotonin.
Oh, yeah.
So serotonin's the sort of happy, relaxed hormone.
Yes.
And when we eat a lot of sugar, we get high insulin, as you'll all know, because that's part of the problem with diabetes. So
Yeah.
insulin goes up.
Mm-hmm.
When insulin is high, there's an amino acid called tryptophan,
Mm-hmm.
which can pass into the brain really easily when
Yes.
insulin is high. So we
Yeah.
eat sugar, insulin goes up, tryptophan goes into
Tryptophan.
the brain.
Yeah.
And tryptophan is what we call a precursor. It's the thing that you make serotonin out of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get tryptophan in the brain, and
Mhm.
then more serotonin is made. So you get this nice sort of relaxed feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But exactly the same thing as with dopamine. The brain then thinks, oh, I don't really like all these really high levels of serotonin, so I'm going to drop
Yeah.
the receptors down. And
Okay.
again, you
Yeah.
need to have more and more. And
Right.
serotonin is that's the neurotransmitter that is boosted by antidepressant medication.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that having plenty of sugar and your serotonin receptors are going down over time,
Yeah.
you're more likely to get low mood.
Yeah.
And in fact, again, if you look in the research, people with sugar addiction are
Yeah.
much more likely to have depression or mood
Oh, yeah.
disorder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's very deleterious for the mental health.
Yeah.
And for motivation. People often feel quite depressed and anxious, and foggy brain is another thing that people talk about, this sort of brain
Yeah.
tiredness or fog that
Yeah.
you get with a high sugar diet.
Right.
And it's probably to do with, you know, all of these neurotransmitter problems and the high insulin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of sort of mechanisms, if you like, by which sugar can well harm the body, as we know, but also
Yeah.
be harming the brain, rewiring the brain.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why sugar addiction is probably one of the most challenging
Mm-hmm.
addictions, because there's a number of reasons. We've had it from sugar, usually from when we're very young. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know about over there, but over here it's quite acceptable to give 2-year-olds great big ice cream, big old cake.
It's everywhere, probably. I think it must be a global problem. Yeah. It's pandemic. Yeah. Right.
Sweets, you know, it's seen as a treat, isn't it? So we've had it from young. Our brains are wired as children. We
Yeah.
don't give our children alcohol,
No.
nicotine, caffeine,
No.
you know, and yet we'll give them sugar. It's a
Yeah.
psychoactive
Yeah.
substance. So number one, that's number one. Number two, you can kind of avoid alcohol. You don't have to drink alcohol. You don't have to smoke cigarettes, but we have to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
So how are we going to navigate that
Yeah.
that sort of food environment and try and have the things that aren't addictive? You know, stick to a low carb diet,
Right.
and not cave in. You know, when we go to the cinema and there's all the popcorn and the ice
Yeah.
cream.
Yeah. Right.
And we're so cued to do it. And these these brain pathways, once we've established them as young people, will always be there. So you don't ever really get better, if you like. The addiction's always there in the background. So even though I've not eaten sugars and carbohydrates for a few years now, if I was to have some, the addiction would light up straight away.
Oh yeah.
And I know other people who I've spoken to where, and I've done it before in the past, where you've had a good long spell not eating any of these things.
Yeah.
You have a little tiny bit and you think, oh, it's fine. I can remember at my daughter's wedding, think, it's fine, I've worked really hard, I'm going to have a bit of that dessert, that looks so delicious.
True.
And
Yeah.
Then I was off then for a few weeks, and put on all the weight that I'd lost for this wedding. It's really hard to get back on track, and they've shown that in animal studies as well.
Oh yeah.
Where they've got mice addicted to sugar water, and then they take it away from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when they give it them back, they go crazy. They're worse than they were before.
Oh,
so
okay.
This intermittent access is a really bad idea. So people stick on your low carb diets and
absolutely. So I mean, probably I can recall a couple of different events, right? I mean, one you mentioned about the mice. So there was another research and study which has been done with two different groups of mice, and then one was fed with cocaine, the other one with sugar, and they definitely were more forthcoming towards sugar than cocaine as such. So to that extent, it is basically harmful. The other thing is the social stigma attached, right? Like you mentioned, I mean, be it alcohol, be it nicotine, it is still considered as some kind of an addiction. There is still a bit of social stigma which is attached to that. But when it comes to sugar, when it comes to these kinds of refined carbohydrates, we actually celebrate our festivals, our any event, right? I mean, with our family, like you said, with maybe even 2-year-old kid, right? I mean, babies. So there's those kinds of differentiations, and then that's how I think sugar is probably the most harmful as compared to anything else when it comes to addiction as such. Yeah.
Yes, I would agree. When you look at all the harms that are being done by diabetes and obesity and number of physical and mental health problems that's now causing, and because it's not acknowledged as an addiction, nobody, people aren't waking up to the harms that it's doing. And I think back a few decades ago, there wasn't that availability of all this sugar and ultra processed food. So occasionally at a celebration to have a treat, that was that seemed that wasn't so harmful. It's now that because it's everywhere and all the time, the body just doesn't recover and the brain is just overloaded.
Right. So this segues into the next thing. I mean, should we look at the recent phenomenon, probably last decade or so, with the advent of technology, online gaming, online shopping, OTT platforms, and to add to that, probably last 15-18 months of pandemic. So how all of that probably has contributed towards a widespread food addiction, let's say for last maybe 10-15 plus years.
Yes. I think so. I think people are the food companies have been very clever in terms of things like ready meals and people losing the skills of certainly over here, losing the skills of cooking from scratch, buying food from scratch. So they're buying foods that have already got more sugars in them, getting that taste for sugar.
Right.
And the marketing around, treat yourself. And someone was saying the other day, when you watch television over here, every other advert is for fast food or processed food. So I think that the food industry is certainly really pushing those things. I think we all have more sedentary lifestyles, particularly as you say, lockdown. We've all been sitting on Zoom and working from home and treating ourselves because times are difficult. Yes, I think a lot of people have. Some people have taken the opportunity to really be more healthy, haven't they? And to be able to sort of control the environment because they are at home and they then can cook for themselves. But I think other people, it's been very hard and they have put on weight and their health has deteriorated.
Right. So I mean, there are a bunch of reasons, right? I mean, there is a pandemic, there are everything that can be that can take place while sitting at your home, right? I mean, easy access to everything while not even stepping out of the home and things like that. I mean, everyone is working, schooling from home. So considering all that, how easy or difficult while you treat your patients, right? I mean, what are the ways and means to basically you work with them in terms of addressing their food addiction? That's one.
Yeah.
And how much of your acclaimed green model, right? I mean, which you and David together you have established and have been leveraging for your patients. How much that helping
Yeah.
in basically keeping or drifting away from this food addiction as such?
Yes, great. Yes, that's right, exactly. So what to do about it is the next big question, isn't it? I think most of us would acknowledge that it does exist, and there are people who really, when you look at the issues that they're facing, it is a food addiction. I'm sure there's people listening who are thinking, oh gosh, that's me. Yeah. So as I say, a lot of my thinking is sort of contained in Fork in the Road. The first step really is to get in a happy place with your food plan, and that would be, obviously it makes sense, if you're an alcoholic, you need to be abstinent from alcohol. So if you're a food addict, you need to be abstinent from the foods that you can't moderate. And we've talked about that being sugars, refined carbohydrates, and ultra processed food. So that's a great start. Now, people don't have to feel that they go cold turkey like I did. I mean, that is one way to do it. And for some food addicts, that's a good way to go, because if you can't moderate any of it, you might as well cut it all out. But I want to just point out to people that, if you're on medication for diabetes, don't just do that without checking out with your doctor, because there are some medications like insulin, and somebody needs to move, like insulin and some of the SGL2 inhibitors. That you need to talk to your doctor about cutting down if you were going to cut out sugar, because your blood sugars would come down quite quickly. And also your blood pressure could improve quite quickly. So don't go cold turkey if you're on medication and without talking to your healthcare team. But for some people, that's the way to go. Just say, right, I'm going to kind of hit this head on for 2 weeks. I'm going to clear everything out of the house that isn't real food. Good food, and I'm just going to tell my family and go for it. Other people take a more stepwise approach, and they might cut out, say, all added sugars first. Stop adding sugar to your tea and coffee. Cut out whatever it is that the thing is that you really can't moderate. For some people, that's breads. For other people, it's sweet things. But cut that out and cut them out bit by bit. But then, of course, there's more work to be done in staying stopped and being able to kind of respond when you get those cues, or maybe when we all go back into work and in the office is full of people bringing in cakes and biscuits. How are you actually going to deal with that situation?
I keep on talking about that. I mean, with most of the people that I work with. Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be a nightmarish situation, because everything is going to be opened up, and people would be getting, looking forward to those kinds of opportunities, celebrating, number of things. Yeah. So that may be a disastrous situation. I don't know. But people would definitely need to be made a lot aware of not getting into that direction as such.
Yes. Or when you go out for a meal, which you're going to want to do, but which sort of restaurants to go to, or how do you order? Like you're going to want to order, say, the meats with the spices on that are kind of done in the barbecue, rather than the maybe very saucy things. Or what are you gonna maybe have a vegetable curry instead of the rice, and how are you going to order your meal? That's another one. So it's sort of working through those situations, if you like. And then, because we talked about how the brain is sort of focused on getting its feel-good neurotransmitters from food, and we're going to stop doing that, we're going to stop getting those from the food. It's really important for your long-term recovery to focus on how you then going to get those feel-good neurotransmitters in other ways. And again, I talk about this in the book. how you're going to get your dopamine, your serotonin,
Yeah.
and your endorphins in other ways. And one really, really good way
Mhm.
is to get some more movement into your life. We don't always call it exercise because
Yes.
some people kind of go, oh, exercise
Yeah.
sounds like such a bore. But really, just walking is
Walking. Yeah.
fantastic,
True.
fantastic. If add a bit more walking in your life and being outside, getting some sunshine, some
Yes.
fresh air, some vitamin D,
Right.
that will also boost all of those
Yeah.
things. Um, Getting some sort of a hobby that you really enjoy, maybe something that you gave up because you'd put on weight or you weren't feeling so well.
Right.
uh, and if you're doing things with other people as well to sort of get back in touch. So trying to find things that are going to give you that boot. I don't know if people can see behind. I've got a wall of, I do knitting, so it's great
Yeah,
in
we
the
do.
evenings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Instead,
It's all colorful. Like, yeah, we can get
yeah,
to see that. Yeah. Nice.
instead of
Yeah.
eating, I need something to do with my hands in the evening.
That's
Um,
wonderful. Yeah.
Knitting or crochet or painting or anything like that that's going to be a pleasant occupation, but it
Oh, yeah.
isn't food focused.
Right.
That's a big part of it. You need to sort of build the life that you want to live, your best life,
Yeah.
without it being food.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lady in one of our so the way that so there's very little in the scientific literature on treatment
Hmm.
outcomes. There's hardly anything published at all. So myself and a colleague are currently running a study that we've set up ourselves where we're running groups for people with food addiction,
Great.
and we're doing some standardized measures and follow-ups.
Yeah.
And we're going the other thing is to that's really effective is for people to get themselves in a group or a community
Hmm.
that understands this problem, is going to
Oh, yeah.
give them that support. It's
Right.
like with the low carb. It's great if you're in a group of people doing the same thing who
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
understand. So we've got these groups ongoing. So
Yeah.
we're going to be we'll eventually hope to publish that data in the same way that David has, really. But
Right.
it's going to be ongoing. So get yourself in a community. The other thing actually that people listening could join in on a Wednesday night UK time, 6 o'clock. So it'd be a little bit late for you guys. I guess it'd be 10:30.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Is that
That
okay?
works.
6
That works.
6
Yeah.
p.m. UK.
Yeah.
There's a new app called Clubhouse. I don't know
Hmm.
if have you
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
Clubhouse? Right, fantastic. So get on Clubhouse at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday, and if people
Uh-huh.
follow me, I'm at Jen Unwin on Clubhouse as well, and I've got a room called Fork in the Road.
Okay.
We it's a food addiction sort of support group chat, but we always have we often have a guest. So this week on Wednesday we've got Amy Berger, who's
Uh-huh. Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know if you know Amy
Most of
Berger.
most of us do follow her, I think, on Twitter.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
she's a nutritionist who wrote a book with Eric Westman, and
Yeah.
she really understands about food addiction because she has some of her own issues around it, which I'm sure she's going to talk about. And people can join in the conversation and come and have a
Yeah.
chat. So that's a nice thing every week, if people wanted to join and learn. There's another fantastic website called
Uh-huh.
sugarxglobal.com, and there's
Okay.
some wonderful people on there. They've got a community
Yeah.
that you can sign up to, and
Sure.
they've got all the right information as well.
Yeah.
So there's things that people can do to kind of sign up. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, does that answer the question?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, a number of follow-up questions I think we covered, and thanks for that. I mean, it is wonderful to have an online community like what you mentioned. So we would be definitely, most of us would be looking forward to basically joining that clubhouse session on Wednesdays. I
fantastic.
mean, whenever it happens here,
We'd be
and
so
that's
pleased to
definitely
have you.
not very late for us here.
Good,
Perfectly fine. Yeah. So,
good.
a couple of different things, right? I mean, anything, we still have probably another maybe 5 to 8 minutes, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So a couple of things. One is on any withdrawals or symptoms that you have seen with people, and then how to deal with that. Because I mean, obviously, coaching and the online community would definitely be helpful. Being in that community, probably that would curb the kind of craving that they would have towards these kind of food. But otherwise, what are the withdrawals symptoms and how to deal with those?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So very similar to low carb and keto, really. So
Okay.
in initially, especially if you're going to go cold turkey,
Yeah.
you might feel um headachy is quite a common one.
Hmm.
Um, gastrointestinal sort of problems, maybe a bit, sometimes people get a bit shaky,
Yeah.
when they're cutting down sugars, and feeling a bit kind of fluey and out of it. Um, I mean that will pass, but it is a little bit unpleasant. And you guys would say the same. We just usually say have a little bit more salt
Yeah.
on your food, because when you cut down your carbohydrates and your insulin levels drop,
Hmm.
you'll lose a lot of sodium and water,
Yes.
and
Yes.
people lose a lot of water weight in the first few days, and
Yeah.
particularly if it's hot, maybe you can really feel a little bit headachy and dizzy. So a little bit of extra salt,
Yeah.
and I mean I tend to have quite a lot of salt anyway because I've got quite low blood pressure, and so that's quite a good trick
Yes.
generally.
Yes.
um, More salt on your food. So those are usually the sort of withdrawal symptoms, and what to do about it. And just take it easy for the first few days. Don't do anything too
Right.
too energetic in case you feel a bit
Yeah.
dizzy.
Dizzy. Yeah. Okay. So maybe last couple of questions, and then we'll open up for the Q&A. One very quick one in terms of any particular guidance for the Asian population. You mentioned about, I mean, curry instead of rice and things like that, right? So, I mean, you definitely would be having some insight about how, let's say, Asian population can change some of the aspects in terms of their food addiction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess that it is the kinds of foods that are traditional, and then how to sort of replace those, isn't it?
Yeah,
So I guess
yeah,
you guys, so I mean, we love a curry here. I tend to have it over. I like roasted cauliflower,
uh-huh,
uh,
yeah. That tastes
cauliflower
real
rice.
nice. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
you can do so many things with
Yes,
with a cauliflower, and yeah, having I have
maybe the cabbage. Yeah,
yeah, sliced cabbage and fried
yeah,
with, you can
absolutely.
put your spices in, and then your curry. And I make my own ghee. You'll be pleased to hear.
Uh-huh.
And I make a nice curry with plenty of ghee in it, so it's
Yeah,
it's really filling. You
right.
um, plenty of protein.
The
Or
cottage cheese, right? I mean, the cottage cheese probably comes very handy. You can do multiple things using a cottage cheese.
yeah,
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 right.
yeah. Paneer, yeah, we love that as well. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
paneer.
really delicious. Yeah. Let me think what else. Things like, so if I went out for a curry, for example, I might order things like the mushroom
Oh
bhaji,
yeah,
and have
stunning.
a couple of sort of vegetable sides as
Oh
well
yeah,
as the curry or the meat grill.
right.
And then you're not having the sugary sauces, and the rice and the naan.
And
Although
yeah,
there are flours, aren't they? I know people
right.
can make chapatis, and I don't know, over here we have somebody who does a thing called fiber flour, which is very low carb,
Okay.
and you
Yeah.
can make breads out of.
Yes.
And oh, the other thing, yes, gram flour.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I use that to make pancakes or onion bhajis as well.
Yeah. The coconut or the almond flour, I mean, they come very handy
Coconut,
in terms of, yeah, doing all those things, right?
pancakes and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you,
Yeah.
you can make those swaps and still feel like you're not sort of missing out. The other thing I'm supposed to be aware of is the sort of sweet fruits.
Oh
So,
yeah.
trying to swap out things like mango is incredibly sugary,
Yes. It is.
uh,
It is. Yeah.
bananas and things like that. And
Right.
what sort of lower carb fruits do you guys have?
We here, I think not a lot of berries, but we can have something like a guava, right? I mean, which is considered to be a little, yeah, low fructose and things like that. But as far
Yeah.
as possible, we can stay away with fruits. I mean,
Yeah.
those may not be absolutely mandatory as such. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
because we're lucky to have the berries, so people tend to have a nice thick yogurt
yeah, yeah.
with berries on. But you could have
Right.
yogurt with your nuts, or yeah, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, and that tastes wonderful. I mean, those kinds of things, a curd or a yogurt with some berries. Yeah, that tastes wonderful. So, can you throw some light on the book that was recently published? Your book, which was published, "Fork in the Road." I mean, anything, any quick this thing view that you want to give us for our, that's okay. Yeah.
Here he is. So, okay, this was the book that I wish I'd had when I was, maybe 12 or, like at least a teenager. I could have understood it. So I've written a simple book. I've got some of my friends in the sugar addiction world. So Bitten Johnson features Anna Fruling, who's on SugarX Global, David Wolf, who's also on SugarX Global, and Georgia Eade, who's the psychiatrist who specializes in keto food plans. They've all contributed their stories and what they do. So I go through more or less as we've done, talking about how to recognize if you're a food addict. Then what's the food plan? There's lots of recipes in there, because it can help people to know, well, what kinds of things do we eat, and then what are these other things that are going to keep you in recovery? So like we were talking about, how do you get these feel good neurotransmitters like exercise and so and then there's lots of resources at the back as well, and all the money from the book goes to a charity in the UK called the Public Health Collaboration that are campaigning for better nutrition advice. And also we're going to have a website soon called Food Addiction Resources, which is linked to the PHC. And next year the PHC conference, which we hope is going to be in May, and we're going to have a 1 day also on food addiction, and there's a 4-day, if anybody's really interested in this. Bitten Johnson is coming to the UK to do a 4-day intensive to help people with food addiction in May next year. So if anybody's so interested that they would like to come over and join in that, they can contact me. But so that's the book in brief, and as I say, all the profits go to the PHC.
Awesome. So just to basically in a nutshell, right, I mean, to wrap up this and before we open up for the Q&A, what are your top 3 tips for the viewers in terms of keeping the food addiction at bay? What could be those top 3 things in your mind?
So number 1, get yourself on a steady food plan that is sustainable, that's sugar free. So that's a massive one. I mean, that's a big old task, but that is number 1. The platform really is to don't be worrying about the weight or whatever. Just get yourself in a steady place with proper real food, no sugar, no grains, no ultra processed foods, and make that aim number 1.
All right.
Number 2, get with the community. So come and join the clubhouse. Join SugarX Global. There's a guy on there, David Wolf, has a free meeting. That probably will be at a weird time for you guys, because it's 9 o'clock UK time, because it's an American meeting. But there are other free meetings that go on Zoom. Listen to podcasts. Get with the community would be my second tip. And then my third tip is to build that sugar-free life that you know. What's going to be your best life that's going to keep you away from sugar? What's more delicious in life for you than sugar? Whether that's I don't know what that would be. That's an individual thing, isn't it? But definitely involving some movement, some hobbies, some using your time not around food to get that dopamine and serotonin in a good way. So those would be my 3.
Awesome. And I mean, that's like a lot of things as takeaways for most of us. So I mean, thanks for sharing with those. So now what we'll do, Jen, is we'll basically look for some of the questions those our viewers will be putting up. So I'll take a pause, check what kind of questions that we have. So Shashi, any questions that we have?
I have unmuted the participants. I think they can ask some questions. I think as of now, there are no questions which are posted.
Okay.
Ask away, or type it in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that.
Right. Yeah.
If anyone's got any questions. I mean, it's a lifelong journey. That's the thing. I don't want anyone to think that this is easy. It isn't easy. I'm not telling you it's easy, but it's going to be worth it, as they say. you know, taking those steps forward. And if you wobble and fall off, just get back on and keep going forwards. It's probably a lifelong challenge. I mean, anyone will know that's listening here that has this. It's, you know, you've been trying to manage it all your life anyway.
Yeah.
It's something that doesn't go away, and you just need to find a way to live with it.
Right. So one thing that comes to my mind, anything called as such as moderation when it comes to food addiction. I think we touched upon that slightly, but if you can probably elaborate on that. And yeah, I mean, is there anything called as moderation?
I mean, it's kind of a defining factor that we can't do moderation, and we've tried. And unfortunately, a lot of the advice is always, just have a little bit of everything, you know, just eat in moderation. The defining factor of being a food addict is you just can't moderate it. You can't have a little bit, you know, I can't have a little bit of chocolate. I never have been able to. So why is that going to change? So yeah, don't bother about moderation, really. That's never going to work. I see someone's asked a question about stevia.
Stevia, yeah. Right.
How frequent can we eat? So my view of, so if you're a proper old food addict, so some people are fine with stevia and sweeteners, and that's quite a good it's quite a good move away from sugars. If you're a proper food addict, eventually you won't moderate sweeteners either. You're going to want more of those, and also they keep the sweet craving going, and they already setting the dopamine off and everything because it's so like sugar. So what I would say is, if you're a proper food addict, move from sugars onto sweeteners if you need to, if that's a help as a transition, but then always think of that as temporary and try and wean down the sweeteners as well. So things like Diet Coke, you know, keto baking, all of those things are traps for food addicts that they're just going to keep you craving. And I mean, I know people who, you know, would drink 10 cans of Diet Coke a day, or loads of that sugar-free gum, or you just end up getting other behaviors around those foods. So you know, if you can moderate stevia and you can have a little bit and you're fine, that's fine. You know, some people can, and it's much better than the sugars. But if you're a proper hard-on food addict like me, you'll have to tailor those down eventually as well. So I hope that answers that one. Have you been able to work out an easier way of establishing what a person's carb threshold might be? That's another great question. I think it's just so individual that the person has to taper it down themselves and see. For a food addict, you're trying to get to the point where they no longer have cravings and hunger and thinking about food all day. So you have to sort of taper things down till you get to that point. And then, as I say, you may find some things like peanut butter, or you know, that are causing other cravings that then need to be cut out. So you're trying to get to that point where you feel peaceful around food, you get on with your life, but then you look forward to your meal, you have your meal, but then you move on with life. You're not then still feeling, what else can I have? It's hard to stop eating, thinking about food all the time. That's the point you're trying to get to, really. Is monk fruit sweetener is best when compared with other sweeteners? I don't really know the answer to that. Do you? I've never actually had monk fruit sweetener myself, so I don't really know whether that's better than stevia. And again, it may be that that's a bit of an individual thing, and if you can have that, and again, not have to keep having things with it in, or you know, it doesn't make you feel more hungry or cravey, then that might be an individual thing for you. I know for me, anything with a sweetener in just made me want to eat loads of it. So sugar-free chocolate, I would just still eat as much of that as I would have ever done a sugary one.
True. Yeah.
I'm a bit of a rock bottom food addict. So okay, my Clubhouse handle is the same as my Twitter. It's I'll put it in the thing, at Jen _Unwin, and I'm the same on Instagram. Although I don't really understand Instagram, so I'm very much on Twitter and Clubhouse.
Yeah. I think same is the case with most of us over here. Yeah, for the reasons probably known to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. Right. So any other questions? Shashi, do you have anything? Or Arun, any questions that you have, just in case?
Thanks a lot, Jen, for the wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prakash.
Right.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Prakash. So if we don't have any more questions, so Shashi, anything else? Any other question that we have?
There's a question here.
There's one here.
Okay.
45, insulin resistant, premenopausal, difficult to reduce weight, have my slips, vegetarian, take eggs, just improve my insulin resistant, PCOS, metformin, concerned about fasting blood sugars. I mean, that's one thing to say, really. It is a little bit harder to be low carb, isn't it, if you're vegetarian, because you by necessity, quite a lot of the food that you eat is a little bit more carbohydratey. I mean, I know the guys have got loads of really good recipes and advice on your website, haven't you? And the Diet Doctor website has a lot of recipes for and food plans for people that are vegetarian. So if the worry there, Ranjani, is about your fasting sugars, it will be about trying to identify where the carbohydrate is in your diet and trying to reduce that. So eggs are good. Cheese, cottage cheese, as we were saying before, but trying to cut down on all the carbohydrates, the breads and the sugars and the fruits.
Right.
Should help you with the insulin resistance. And it's difficult for women as they get older, because it is harder and harder to lose weight. A little bit of intermittent fasting can be good as well. Do you guys talk about that sometimes? It's okay to skip breakfast and
Absolutely.
Yes. She's saying she does that. Great. Good. Yes. A little bit of intermittent fasting. A little bit of caution. Food addicts sometimes don't do so well with fasting, because it can make them, if you get over hungry, it can then trigger you into overeating. So the best thing to do when you're starting out is to have your 3 meals and, really keep that regular. And when you're really solidly into that, then you can start to push your breakfast back a bit if you want to just open up the fasting window a little bit more. But do it very cautiously, so you don't get over hungry and fall off the wagon.
I hope that must have answered, Ranjani, your question. Yeah, I guess so.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks. Yeah.
I think that's all, Yogesh.
No problem. So I mean, we're coming towards the concluding part of this podcast, Jen, and as we are pressed on time, but it's wonderful hosting you today on this podcast. And once again, thanks a lot from myself and the entire DLife community, both for your time as well as the amazing intel that you have provided to us during this particular podcast. And I'm sure our viewers, they have gathered a lot of key takeaways, and hopefully they'll disengage from their food addictions very soon, from what they've got to listen to during this past 1 hour. So looking forward to more such sessions with you in future, Jen. It would be really wonderful to have you hosting you on DLife.in. And for our viewers, this podcast is going to be made available on social media in a couple of days. So do share with those who have missed to attend today's session as such. And please stay tuned for similar exciting sessions from DLife.in. Thank you, and see you in the next. Thanks, Jen. It was really wonderful to have you today. Thanks
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks all.